Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Brian Laufer and I'm the Vice President here at QuoteWerks. If you have any questions as we go along here, please feel free to ask them in the GoToWebinar toolbar questions box as we go along. If there are any questions that we do not answer throughout the demo, we will do our best to answer them towards the end. If you think of any questions after the webinar or we do not fully answer your question, make sure to email or give us a call. So QuoteWerks has over 55 different integrations. This is not one of them, however. We have a number of third-party developers that have created integrations and links to QuoteWerks using our APIs. And you can see these third-party add-ons on our website just by going to the products menu and third-party add-ons. These include integrations to accounting, workflow, CRM, and more. The Avalara integration that we are talking about today was developed by ConnectIt Software. And joining us today is Steve Siggs from ConnectIt Software, also Hilltops IT. And we also have Chad Meszaros from Avalara as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pass this over to Chad, and he's going to go ahead and kick things off here.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you joining and really excited about this. My name's Chad Meszaros. I'm a senior sales executive at Avalara. Been with the company the past 9 years, and QuoteWerks is something that's came up in a lot of conversations over the years. So we're very excited to really kick off this partnership and kind of move forward with that. So I want to take a few minutes just really talk about why sales tax is important, what you need to know about sales tax, and then obviously how this kind of integration with the help of Steven and the team can help you with your sales tax compliance. So real quick, a little bit about Avalara. We've been around since 2004, have really grown, and one of the biggest reasons for the success is having more than 1,400 signed partner integrations, and that's important. So if you're using QuoteWerks or you have other e-commerce or ERP systems or accounting software that needs connected, we hopefully already have a pre-built integration to allow you to connect to fit your business needs. So I think that's really led to the success. We're helping customers, probably over 33,000 active customers today. So, you know, sales tax, as you'll see, is very complex and continues to get more complex as laws change and states kind of crack down on things. So a lot of people know Avalara as kind of the sales tax software company, which is still true. But over the last few years, I think we've really progressed into more of a compliance solution. So you'll see, just I won't go through all of these, but just a variety of services that we can help you with your business, in addition to the sales tax calculations and returns that we'll talk about. So again, really have taken on that compliance piece, very similar to maybe what you'd use for a CPA, but everything from tax research and on, we can certainly assist with. So the big question, why does sales tax matter? At the end of the day, it comes down to revenue. Sales tax is right behind property taxes, is the biggest money-making venture for states. So, you know, you have 45 of the 50 states have sales tax, and it's really something that they really rely on to, you know, keep afloat. So it's important, and businesses of all sizes, from a mom and pop shop to Fortune 500 companies, I mean, it's something that you really can't get away when it comes to sales tax. So, you know, it really comes down to the where, the who, and the what. You know, where are you located? You know, who you're selling to? What are you selling? And a lot of people, it really changed the landscape in the last few years is economic nexus. And if you're not familiar, there was this huge Supreme Court decision in 2018, South Dakota versus Wayfair, that led to states being able to create nexus, or companies create nexus within the state by just selling a certain amount of product into the state. So all 45 states that have sales tax have all adopted some type of rules around economic nexus. And you can see, I mean, from 2018 up until 2021, how many states have added these. We have a free assessment. We can help you review this. Our software will help you track this, but it's just been a huge need for businesses as you move forward, because economic nexus is just continuing to growing. It's important. And at the end of the day, you know, it all comes back down to the states needing their money. So to give you an idea of what their thresholds, the most common I see is kind of what you see there with Georgia, $100,000 or up to 200 sales. But as you, of course, all states are a little bit different. California is a little bit larger. Alabama is 250,000. So again, something our software can help track. But even if you're not using our service. Something to keep in mind is if you're selling out of the state that you might have that physical presence today, that you could be creating additional tax liability. So at the end of the day, like I said, compliance not optional. It comes down to needy and greedy states. As we're coming out of this, what I'd consider kind of post-COVID world, I think states need revenue more than anything. So, constantly something they're looking at. And then there's multiple things your business can do, is from acquisitions, mergers, hiring people in different states. Obviously people working from home can create physical presence. So something to continue to keep an eye on it and make sure that you're handling sales tax correctly. Again, I've used the word nexus a few times, obviously economic nexus. If you're not familiar with the term, it's just the level of connection between the taxing jurisdiction and your business. There's always been a kind of a physical presence that's created nexus, obviously with the economic. So there's a large list of things that can kind of create that liability as well, which obviously are listed here. And if there's additional questions, obviously we can dig into this afterwards or even just on a future call as well. But other common challenges you'll see is, from drop shipping, adding new products, shipping and handling that, there's different things that can cause issues when it comes to product taxability, which again, our software, I'll show you just briefly how that can help determine that. But that's something to keep an eye on, as well as what you're selling can also determine the taxability. So how can you streamline sales tax compliance? I think that's the $1,000,000 question here. And obviously, while we're all here to kind of learn. So I like this chart. At the very basic level, these are the 5 steps you need to do. So we need to start with, again, why I spent a little bit at the beginning on talking about nexus, but understanding where your business needs to collect and remit sales tax is the kind of that first step. Obviously, registering with those jurisdictions. So those are things that Avalara can help you with as well. And then, the rest of the call, we're really going to kind of speak to 3, 4, and 5 is how do you get help calculating it, tracking exemption sales, remitting it back to the tax authorities. So we'll kind of walk through that. And when it comes to those steps, really Avalara, these are, again, while you saw the variety of services we offer, these are really, in my mind, still the 3 core services that most people probably know us from. But the biggest piece being Avatax in the middle. So Avatax is a cloud-based software. That's what the team has built and spent time building the integration to QuoteWerks. So Stephen will show that here briefly, what that looks like. But at a very basic level, we're going to replace that sales tax functionality, and it's going to point to Avatax to provide that. And I'll show you on the next slide exactly what goes into that. On the far right, you also have the managed return. So if you want to automate the remittance to the states, obviously, if you're collecting sales tax, every month, every quarter, you got to remit that back to the states. So we can help automate that process as well. And then on the far left, this is a service I think that either most customers really need it or they might not need it at all. But if you're dealing with a lot of exemption certificates, we also have a solution that can help you manage those certificates in real time. So you'd have a digital copy of all your exempt certificates. If you're in a state like Florida where they expire each year, you can run reports to see which ones may have expired or are about to expire, and request new certificates right within the software to request that from your customer base. So if you're dealing with exemption certificates, definitely something that we can help with as well. And then kind of going back to that Avatax piece, which again, Stephen's going to show what this integration looks like. But I like this chart because it really lays this out. So all of these things happen in less than a second. The integration that's built, when you're using Avatax with QuoteWerks, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to validate that address. And as long as you have nexus in that state, we're going to continue with the calculation piece. We apply any kind of sourcing rules. We also turn that validated address into latitude, longitude, so we can pinpoint the exact location of where that invoice is going. So you can see, for example, in that picture on number 3, there could be multiple tax rates within the same zip code. So a lot of people today may use a zip code based table, may not be the most accurate. You may not be capturing the right state, city, county. A lot of big cities might have a special taxing jurisdiction as well. So pinpointing that exact location is important. At the same time, we're keeping up with all the rules, the rates, and the regulations with these states. So if you're entering a new state, we have all those rates and rules, so there's no extra research to be done. You have a content team that works around the clock to keep up to date with that. So we're making sure all of those rates and rules are up to date, making those changes as needed. Being a cloud-based software, we can roll that out for everybody if a certain state or city changes their tax rate. We also check for the exemption status, whether you store the certificates with us or continue to do it as you do today and pass that customer as being exempt to us. Obviously, we check to make sure if that customer is exempt. And then kind of what I touched on earlier, that product taxability. So in number 6, we also have system tax codes that you can map to your items. So for something like shipping that might be fully exempt in California but taxable in another state, you can apply our tax codes. So we will actually tax at every line item versus just provide sales tax for the total order, which really lets you, make sure you're doing it correctly, staying compliant, and obviously just a better experience for your customers. So if you're not charging them sales tax on everything when maybe a couple of the line items should be exempt from sales tax. So again, providing that taxability at line item detail instead of the whole order. Obviously, anytime of sales tax, holidays, etc., you then see that sales tax back on the QuoteWerks. So I know that sounds like a lot, but honestly, it's less than a second. You, your sales reps, or whoever's placing that order probably would not even know we exist. They just see the sales tax get calculated in real time. And then we store that within the Avalara dashboard for future remittance. So all of the invoices that have been calculated by Avalara, you're going to be able to review those transactions. You're going to be able to pull reports, city, county, whatever report you may need. So I can almost guarantee that your sales tax reporting, the reports you'd be able to pull would be, more accurate, a little bit better than maybe today. And then obviously we can use that information to do the automation of the returns for you as well, and kind of that filing and remittance at the end of the month and the quarter. So, I think a lot of this is self-explanatory, but at the end of the day, why automate your sales tax management? It comes down to, we want to help companies be more accurate. It's just more efficient. It can be a customer satisfaction. The amount of stories I've heard in the last 9 years of customers of mine saying, hey, this customer got mad because I continued to charge them the wrong tax rate because our system was calculating this rate. They said that was incorrect, and then, potentially lost a customer. So, keeping your customers happy by charging them the correct sales tax is important. We want to help you mitigate the risk, make sure you're doing it more accurate, avoid, surprises if you go through a state audit. And obviously, as you grow, if your nexus increases, you acquire a company or hire people in other states and have to now start collecting in additional states, once you're set up in Avalara, it's a click of a button to add additional states. So you can then, make sure you're compliant in those new states as you move forward. So a lot of advantages to it. And again, happy to talk to anybody afterwards and answer any questions. I put my contact information on here. So again, feel free to shoot me an email if there's any specific questions that we don't get to today. And like I said, I'm really excited to kind of kick off this partnership with QuoteWerks and the Hilltops team or ConnectIt. So again, looking forward to you. And I will, at this point, pass it back over to Steven.
Actually, before we do that, we did have a couple of questions that came up, and just so people know, all the contact information in this webinar, we will go ahead and send out afterwards as well. So got a question here from Joel. I think I know the answer, but I think Chad, you'll be better suited to answer this, possibly Steve. Do you charge a percentage for all line items? And the second part of that, do you charge the customer money for non-tax items or tax-exempt customers?
So the first part of the question, I'm assuming it goes back to the Avalara pricing piece. So we base that on the amount of completed invoices in your Nexus states only, which is nice. So any state that you don't have Nexus, obviously you may still have some orders going there, but you don't have a liability to collect sales tax. So we do subtract those out. We look at the amount of invoices. So not really worried about line items as necessarily, just the amount of completed invoices in those Nexus states. If there is a tax exemption though, and it is a Nexus state, those would count. There is still a calculation, even though it may come back as a 0 because it's exempt. So those could count in certain areas, but yeah, anything outside of your Nexus states are subtracted out, and we really only look at the amount of completed invoices in the Nexus states.
And then Joel has more questions here. We got one here. What happens if your tax rate is wrong? If the company gets audited, how do you protect the customer?
Yeah, so we have some accuracy guarantees in the terms. We'd like to think that all of them are right. If there's something that's noticed, obviously you're able to roll that straight to our content team. They'll do the review of that. If it's something that, comes to find out it was incorrect, obviously they make that change. Being a cloud-based software, again, that's getting rolled out for all 30,000 customers of ours. So we'll do that. but yeah, there is some words of the accuracy guarantee within that terminology that I can kind of share with that link with you as well, just kind of how that's kind of protected.
All right, perfect. All right, so what we'll do then is we'll go ahead and make Steve the presenter here so he can show us how all of this works.
Okay. Thank you, Brian, and thank you for that, Chad. I learned quite a bit from that presentation. That was really useful. Hopefully you can see my screen, which has got the ConnectIt website on there. Just a brief introduction of myself. Our brand is ConnectIt Software. The company name is Hilltops IT. We've been around for around 17, 18 years now, and I think it's probably fair to say we're one of the more prolific integrators and add-on creators for QuoteWerks. Take a look at the website, connectit-software.co.uk, to find out more about that. For now, let's take a look at QuoteWerks and our Avalara integration. This is a very new product. It's only been out 4 weeks or so now. And there's a number of different functions that it will perform that Chad briefly mentioned in his presentation. To kick those utilities off, we've got several custom options on the tools menu, resolving the address in Avalara, getting the tax rate from Avalara, and the tax amount. There's also void transactions if we're creating transactions in Avalara. Hopefully you're all fairly familiar with QuoteWerks, and you can see I've got a document with 4 line items. It's being shipped to Aspire Technologies. I've purchased this audio equipment. And at the moment I've got 0 tax rate. The first thing that we're going to do is check this address against the Avalara database to find out the specific 9-character zip code rather than the 5-digit, as Chad alluded to. It can vary depending on which side of the street your location is as to what the tax should be. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Tools menu option and Resolve Address in Avalara. Utility is going to kick off, and it's just going to ask me to confirm that I want to look up the address. Go click yes to that. That's the Avalara database, and it's saying that it's found a slightly different address there as compared to the one that we've got detailed on our QuoteWerks document. I'm going to click OK to this. It's asking me to select the address that I want to update my QuoteWerks document for. And as you probably see in the background, it's changed the format of the address line 1 slightly. And we've also got that 9-digit zip code now instead of just the 5 digits. Looking at the tax rate, as I said, we've got 0 rate at the moment, so we want to find out the tax rate that I should be using for this particular zip code. So I'm just going to go to the Tools menu and get tax rate. Again, just confirming that I want to perform this action. Yes, I do. And from the Avalara database, it's found that I should be charging 6.5%, 6% for the state tax and 0.5% for the county tax. If I click yes to that, that is going to update my tax rate as well. Getting on to the calculating the tax amount, it is taking into account not just the zip code, it's also taking into account the individual tax codes for my individual line items. We can get into that in a bit more detail, but suffice to say for now, there's a kind of priority around how the integration is going to use these tax codes. First off, if my product is actually in Avalara, is going to use the one that's set up in Avalara. If it's not there, then it's going to use this one that I've specified on my document. Now, sales reps might not know the appropriate tax codes, so if that's the case, then it's going to default to use a tax code that I've assigned to this item type. If it still can't find one, then it's going to use a default which is set up as part of the configuration. For the purpose of this demo though, we'll just go with these tax codes and get the tax amount. And yes, I do want to do that. And in the background, we're going away and calculating that tax amount. So this has done a number of things. Firstly, as you saw in the background, it's brought across the tax amount for the individual line item. It's also given me a little bit of detail as to how it calculated that, the taxable amount it should use, the tax code it used, and the value it calculated out. It has also, on the custom tab, given me a bit more of a breakdown of the tax rates used. Again, from the when we went to tax amount, we saw that it got the county tax and the state tax. And on the custom tab, it has put my total tax amount. For the keen-eyed around you, you'll notice that the tax amount here, 144.35, is slightly different to the amount that QuoteWerks calculated, 134.04. That slight discrepancy is because the shipping, for whatever reason, Avalara thinks we should be charging tax for shipping, even though within my QuoteWerks setup, I've said that shipping is non-taxable. So those are the three utilities we've got, and I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
All right, so we do have a question here from Paul. I'll probably be the one to take this one. The question from Paul is, if we are using Avalara and QuickBooks for invoicing, is there any benefit of integrating with QuoteWerks? So Paul, the question there is going to be, are you quoting with tax? If you are quoting with tax, then yes, it would make sense to use this integration. But if you are one of those that quotes with the fact that it says, tax will be calculated on invoice, then you wouldn't need that. So it just depends on how you're quoting your customers, and then also how they're providing payment as well, because it is going to be important to, if you are going to be collecting any sort of payment, you're going to have to give some sort of estimate there on tax as well. Chad or Steve, do you have anything that you'd add to that?
No,
the only thing I would say, Brian, so far we've implemented this in a number of different companies. All of them have got Avalara integrated with their ERP or their QuickBooks or their whatever it is. They know at that stage that they have to be for quoting the charging the appropriate tax amount. But what they want to be able to do is quote accurate tax as well. So then their customer haven't got any surprises when it comes to receiving the invoice, and it's sort of a step towards smoothing out that process to be quoting it accurately up front rather than resolving it up after the fact.
Right. Chad, did you have something you were going to say there?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it on that answer. I mean, it really just depends on if you're calculating that tax on the front end. Obviously, you're using Avalara and QuickBooks. There is an advantage to making sure you're calculating that same amount in QuoteWerks, but if that sales tax is included on the quote.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Let's see, another question here. Paul here, he is using Avalara already. Would there be an additional cost, or does our existing subscription give us this? And I think, Steve, you're going to answer the first part of that, and then Chad, you might follow up with the rest.
Yeah, we do charge for the integration. It's an annual fee. The pricing is on the website. Basically, it's $500 for your first year, which gets you the software itself, our services to set it up and support it. The ongoing cost is $200 a year.
Yeah, and from an Avalara perspective, when you use our Avatax service, you may be familiar, we have an annual service fee, but then we also have what we call platform fees as well, which is for any integration you use. So depending on the level, there could be an additional fee for that extra platform, meaning the QuoteWerks, you already have QuickBooks. If there's a certain tier, they may not be an extra charge either. So it just depends. I would say check with your account manager. If you're not sure who that is, shoot me an email. We'll get you in touch just to see if there are any additional fees. It'll be pretty minimal. For the most part, your subscription is going to handle most of that, but there could be a small fee.
Okay, perfect. And I'm not sure if your integration here, Steve, is going to answer this question here from Elizabeth. We also already use Avalara with QuickBooks and are a QuoteWerks user. We've found that the sales tax calculated in QuoteWerks is often off by a penny or two from what Avalara calculates in QuoteWerks. Does your plugin for QuoteWerks resolve this issue, and when will the tax issue on shipping be resolved? As some states have taxable shipping and others do not. And so I'll go ahead and handle the sales tax on shipping. Currently, Elizabeth, on the QuoteWerks side, we're looking at how to handle that. Hopefully, we'll have an answer for you soon on that. Steve, as far as how things are written, I believe your tax calculations are on the custom tab. Is that correct?
The results of it are, yes, absolutely. And I haven't seen penny differences so far, but what I can say is we're basically throwing the information from QuoteWerks at the Avalara web services. QuickBooks is throwing exactly the same information in a similar way, then I would expect it to return the same result. As far as how that gets communicated to your end user, one change you will probably want to make with your layouts within QuoteWerks is we placed what would have been the tax amount with the custom number one. We've also created a formula here to sum the subtotal with custom number one with the shipping amount. So instead of using QuoteWorks' own field for the grand total, we're overriding that with a custom calculation so that the user gets presented with the correct information.
Perfect. All right. Got a couple of other questions that have come in. They're kind of one-off, so I'll go ahead and answer those afterwards here. Elizabeth, yes, as far as your question about is there a similar formula change for Quote Valet, yes, you would need to change that there as well. Let's see. Okay, so we have a question here from Sean. Is there a difference in calculating tax on individual items versus a grouped item?
So we would, if we look at a more complex example, so in fact, that is not one. That was the one. Grouped items. So we're calculating tax on these like child items of the main item. We're not calculating the tax on these kind of header ones. So it's the product service lines that we're looking at when we perform the calculation.
Okay. So when you're doing that, then are you applying the quantity multiplier from the group, the header line all the way down? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been around that block. Thank you, Brian.
All good. All right. All right, to complicate things a little bit further on that, Steve, and this is something on our development front that we always run into as well. How would you handle a discount on that group of items? So because you have the ability at a header line to, discount it by like 10% because you're grouping them together.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And I'll also cover off charges with this. With a charge, we would just send it as if it was a standard line item to get that across. With the discount, as it stands at the moment, without getting into too much technical detail, Avalara kind of splits it across the individual line items. So all of the line items, not just these two. Now, I understand that isn't 100% correct, but that's the way that it's doing it at the moment. What I'm looking to do is to be able to just pick up this is a discount on these two line items and it shouldn't apply to these lower line items. At the moment, we're not quite there with it yet.
Let's see, we have a question here from Matt. How do we handle quote valet options changes affecting the totals? Because, obviously, I don't think this is going to apply, but in quote valet, you have the ability to say option A or option B, and obviously that could affect the tax obligations at that point. At this point, I don't think that's something that you're going to be able to handle. Is that correct?
I think we can. We can. So what you see me do is click a bunch of menu options to kick these things off. Now, if you are running QuoteWerks Corporate, we can actually use QuoteWerks scripting to automatically trigger these things from going off. So those triggers would typically be before you save the document or before you print the document. So based on those triggers, we can actually go and recalculate the tax amount or to reflect those changes. It does require the QuoteWerks Corporate Edition, though, just to emphasize that.
Perfect. This question, I think, is going to be for Chad. I think you already touched on it in your introduction here, but Alex missed the beginning here. So about tax exemption certificates. The majority of Alex's business is tax exempt. Is tracking exemption certificates part of the package? If yes, how?
Yeah, no, great question. So it is what I would consider kind of an add-on, but we have a service called ECM Pro, which is just exemption certificate management. So we do have the ability to store digital copies of all of your exemption certificates. That obviously communicates with QuoteWerks, with the Avatax piece. Once they're on file, it gives you the ability to collect and, ask your customers for new ones. You click of a button, hey, we need one of our certificates expired or it's invalid. You can request a new one. They would actually get an email and be able to fill out the new exempt certificate right there within the email, and then it comes back in. So it can certainly help you track and manage those. That's a huge functionality. Like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, it's something that someone either really needs or they might not need it at all. But for those people that have a lot of exempt customers, certainly worth at least evaluating and taking a look at.
If you're still with us, we had a question here from John. So you did mention here, Steve, that there was some setup involved. Would it be possible to show the setup there?
Yeah, sure. Where are we? So yeah, with all of the ConnectIt software, we always have this configuration utility behind the scenes, just so as we don't have to rewrite the thing when somebody wants to do something slightly different. So all of the field mappings that we were that are set up are all part of this configuration, where I get the transaction date from, where I'm reading the customer code from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these kind of funky hieroglyphic macros are reading from the QuoteWerks document. This is just a hard-coded value. So document headers, where I'm reading stuff off of the document items. The Avalara setup, which is just username and password to get it set up. We've got options to switch things on, switch things off, stop people doing things. And also I mentioned the tax codes and the item types. So again, it's all part of the configuration. I can go in and put in the appropriate product and service item types that I have, and the relating tax code for the integration to then pick them up.
Perfect. And then I think you mentioned as well that if the item already exists in Avalara, that it would bring in the tax code. How does that work?
That's Avalara doing its magic. So Avalara, when we send the information to Avalara, it just sees that this manufacturer part number exists there, and it uses whatever's configured in there to perform the calculation.
Okay. And then I had a question a little bit. I think John here doesn't use Avalara right now, so we got some questions about that. The PB codes that you had there, where did those come from? Did Avalara auto-generate those codes?
So they are from Avalara's, is it the Nexus chat? Is that what it's called? Well,
yeah. So those are what we call our system tax codes. We have a website you can visit. It's public knowledge, but I mean, you can go through and kind of pick those out as needed. You may have seen on Steven's screen, he has the default at P with all zeros. That's tangible personal property. It looks like that's the default code. So if you don't map to our tax codes, then we would actually use that P with all zeros. So if you have Nexus, meaning it's fully taxable, and there it is right there. So that's the default. The ones that have, more letters or numbers beside the all zeros, that means that, that's going to be specific to that product. For shipping example, you're going to have, whether it's taxable or exempt, we have a whole matrix built out on the back end. So we have thousands and thousands of codes. Most people only need a handful, but you can go through that website, pick what you may need to fit your product and enter those. And then the nice part is, worst case, they default to fully taxable as well with that tangible personal property code there. That makes sense.
And of course, since we've been on a little bit longer, we've got more questions that have come through. Question here from Liz here. You mentioned compatibility with QuoteWerks Corporate for the quote value calculations with optional items. Is that the only feature that doesn't work with QuoteWerks Standard?
That is correct. Yeah, everything that I've shown you today, that works with Standard Pro or Corporate Edition. It's just that automation piece that wouldn't work.
Perfect. And then question here from Doug. Question on discounts. If we use a single cumulative discount across the entire quote, how does Avalara handle this versus the example where you have a discount applied to the living room and discount applied to the bedroom? What if it is just one discount?
Then it would split it across all of those line items. So in that scenario, it would actually do what you want it, do what you expect it to do. This scenario I was showing you, it's breaks down a bit.
Awesome. Okay. And
I've just brought up that tax code lookup screen on Avalara's website, just to go back to that previous question. There's the tax codes based on whatever factor you might want to.
Interesting.
Look at.
And to add on that right, you can see you can pull an Excel file if it's something easier to look that way. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can kind of navigate through those. And like I said, we keep it pretty granular. It's really up to you how deep you need to go on that. And it does seem overwhelming at times, but most people only need a handful to fit certain parts of their business.
Okay, very good. Let's see, and I don't think this is going to be something that you're going to be able to answer in a positive way here. We had a question, are we going to see this exported to an accounting system? So is there a way for this information that you're putting into the custom field to get that over to your accounting system when doing an export from QuoteWerks?
If you used Sage, we've got an integration for that. If you use Business Central, we've got an integration for that. quite how QuoteWerks would deal with it with QuickBooks. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so at this point, I think I am going to go ahead and end it. I think those were the last questions. But thank you again, guys. And if anybody has any additional questions that we did not answer, feel free to send an email to community@quoteworks.com or reply back to the email with your question as well, and we'll be able to answer those for you. So thank you again, guys, and have a great day.